Hello everyone, welcome to VizConnect, connecting with the art of data visualization and storytelling. My name is Sagar Kapoor. I'm part of customer success team at Tableau. So VizConnect is a weekly community call which helps you to connect with the art of data visualization and storytelling and get inspired by our Tableau Zen Masters, Tableau champions to go ahead and get started your journey with Tableau and also craft your skills in data visualization and storytelling. We have a YouTube channel. Go ahead, subscribe to it. Some great content is waiting for you. We have a LinkedIn group. Go ahead, get started, connect with each other, and learn from each other. And also, we just had a Tableau conference. All the episodes are out for you. Go ahead, binge watch it, and learn something from the Tableau community. With that, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. His name is Chris Westlake. He has been a Tableau enthusiast since first introduced to the software in 2018. He was among the first cohort of Tableau student ambassadors and spent time as a co-lead of Sports with Sunday, participating in community initiatives and building a Tableau public profile has enabled him in leverage his way into data visualization career and a job using a tool that he loves. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Chris to talk about creating unit maps for your quantified sales service analysis. Chris, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thanks for coming along and joining my session. Just going to go ahead and share my screen. You just indicate that you cannot see that just yet. Sorry. Here we go. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, Chris. Please go ahead.
So as Sagar was already saying, I'm Chris. I'm a Tableau enthusiast. I've always been interested in data, probably from when I was kind of 10 years old. Data just always took my fancy. I watched a lot of sports, and just seeing all of the statistics that there were in there just brought the whole thing to life. And being able to visualize that data with Tableau just makes everything so much more amazing. And being able to leverage this into a career is amazing as well. I'm currently working as a visualization developer in a UK healthcare company. I'm trying to bring about improvements to the NHS to make everything a bit more streamlined and using data to do that. So I'll go ahead and get into main topic of this session. So I thought that I'd go through this visualization that I produced a little while ago. It looks at my walks and runs throughout 2021. I started the year kind of trying to be really healthy, hit a few bumps in the road along the way, and just thought it would be good to look at kind of how to take your data out of Strava, Garmin Connect, or whatever platform you use, and create these kind of this small multiple map in a uniform axis. The view's really clean, I hope, and simple. You can see it working quite well as a kind of printout. If you've got friends, family who do a lot of running, walking, they might maybe like this as a Christmas present, I don't know, or for your own analysis heading towards the end of the year. So there's also this kind of show and hide detail pane, which again, taking all of this off the main view just helps keep it really clean and simple. So why use small multiples? Very simple reason. You can't really see what's going on here. If I zoom in here to where I do most of my activities, they're all just overlapping and it's generally a bit of a mess. So taking each one of these onto its own thing, we start to see something a bit like this, which still is far from ideal. Because I started the year down in the south of England and then moved up to Scotland for most of my other activities, it's just a bit too spread out to work looking at the whole of the UK on a map like this. So really unifying the axis is the only way to achieve the desired effect. So the first thing that you need to think about is getting hold of your data. So for this, whatever platform you use to record your activities, you'll be able to download the data that's behind those. So it'll have all of your latitude and longitude points that it plots as you go along your route, which enables us to plot the lines that we need. Usually when you download that data, you'll download it as a GPX file, which you'll need to convert to a CSV for Tableau to be able to read it. This is quite easy. There are loads of tools that can help you with this on Google. Yep. You'll then need to do quite a bit of cleaning to the data. It's simple to do. What the converter will do is you'll give it all of your GPX files, and it'll transform each of them into a CSV and just stack them on top of each other. So you'll need to take out all the headings as you go through each one and add in any other information that you might want in there. I used Excel for this, but you can use whatever tool you're most comfortable with. So if we go ahead and dive into Tableau, I've just opened up a new workbook here and just going to connect to my data file like so and put in the appropriate sheet. So what you can see down here, just in the snapshot of data that we've got a field for the type of activity, a field for the time, which goes into quite a lot of detail so that you can pull out these latitude and longitude points as you go around your route. There's an activity ID, just so that we can differentiate between all of the different activities. And then I've added in the duration as a time and also as a text so that you get these minutes and second marks. And then the distance, which should be coming up as a decimal number. So let's go ahead into the sheet. There are a number of calculated fields that we need to create in order for this to work. So I'll take you through each one of them step by step. I believe this is recorded. So if you miss anything, don't understand anything, you can go back and watch it again in your own time. So before we do that, I'm just going to pull up a map of one of our activities so that we know kind of roughly the sort of thing that we're looking for. You can see here we need it to be a line, and we just put time, the exact time, onto the path, and we see the route. So we're just going to keep that there so that we know what shape we want activity 1 to take. Stay on that sheet. So the first thing that we need to think about for unifying these axes is where we want our x coordinate to start and finish, just hovering over there so you can see. Then the same for the y, start and finish. So we're going to create our first field, try and number them so that it's easy to follow later. What we want to do is come up with that maximum point on the x-axis for each individual activity. So for that, we're going to use a fixed level of detail. So at every activity ID, we want the max longitude because we're on the x. We hit OK. Then we do the same thing for minimum value. So again, the fixed figure again, the fixed level of detail for activity. Then we use the min function. For the y, what we're going to do is select those two fields and just duplicate them because the calculations inside are almost identical for both of these. So this is calculation 3 for y max, and rather than longitude, because we're on the other axis, we use the latitude. The same thing for the min. So now that we've done that, we need to kind of come up with the distance that we travel going from left to right and bottom to top. Now, that could be really simple if it weren't for the curvature of the Earth. So because the Earth is curved, it's not quite going to be just the max point minus the min point, because we're not on a 2D object. So just to help visualize this, I've got a picture of a globe here. So your latitude lines are these ones that go around the globe this way. The equator is a latitude line. And the miles that you have to travel to change your degree, so going up towards the North Pole, for example, varies between about 68.7 and 69.4 for every miles that you have to travel to change 1 degree. So it'll vary depending on where you are in the world. For the UK, it's about 69.06, but a bit of trial and error just to make sure that the shape comes out as you'd expect it is fine. The longitude lines, these other ones, are a little bit more complicated. So at the equator, you can see they're kind of at their furthest distance apart, and then they converge to each other. So at the equator, to go 1 degree to the right, you'd need to move 69.172 miles. And because of the curve, it follows a cosine curve, where we use the latitude and radians as the degree in there, and then multiply it by that distance. So if we go ahead and implement that in our workbook, open that up. So first of all, we want to look at the miles degree of latitude, which I said was 69.055 for the UK. And then we do the same thing again for miles longitude, just using that function that was in the slide there. So we use the cosine of the radians of the latitude, and then we multiply it by the value of the equator, which is 69.72. So now that we've got that, we can calculate the width of each of our activities and also the height. So in order to do this, we're just going to pull this width. And we just want to take the max of the x value, take away min of the x, and then multiply it by our allowance for the curvature of the Earth. The miles per longitude for the width. Then we recreate that again. Latitude. So this time using the y max minus the y min, and that the miles. And the final thing that we really need to think about in terms of these axes is the which one of these is going to be bigger. So we want to plot this into a square. So we need to scale everything down so that they're both on the same axis scale. So for that, we're going to create a field that just asks which one, x or y, is bigger. We just use the max of width. Height. But I called it miles per latitude. So we'll go back and change that. This. I'll just call this the y. And I'll just show you that has pulled through the y height. So we're then also going to want to scale all of these so that all of our maps are on the same scale. And to do this, we just want to divide our X and Y value, which we're going to create in a minute, by whichever one is bigger, either the height or the width. So we'll call this the normalizing multiplier. And we want to say if our height is bigger than the width, then we want to return 1 over height. Else, return 1 over the width. So we can now finally start thinking about our actual X and Y coordinates. So for this, I'll start with the X. We want to take every X value that we have, which is going to be our longitude points, and we want to take them back up so that the smallest value is at 0 and on the y-axis. So for that, we just take away our X min. Should we take away that in brackets there as well? And then we need to bring it back towards the center. So we add in, sorry, we need to account for the curvature of the Earth. It's easy to forget that. Then we'll start a new line here. So we then need to come back into the center. So for that, we need to know where the maximum is so that we know what we're looking for the center of. And then we take away our total width, divide it by 2. Not just pop brackets around all of that. And then because we want to bring it all back into that 0 to 1 scale, we just need to multiply by our normalizing multiplier, which remember is just dividing by whichever is bigger, the height or the width. So we hit OK on that, and then recreate it. Or we go all the way to the bottom, so we use our latitude, take away our y min, multiply by the curvature of the Earth, and then we want to bring it back to the center using that max axis minus y height, divide it by 2, and then multiply by that normalizing constant. Just going to check that I did the X right there. Okay, so we're now ready to start building our maps. So you can bring X onto columns, Y onto rows, and then if we bring the activity into detail, you see we have 1 dot for every activity ID in here. We want to see this as a line, and the path that the line takes should be the exact date. So this again just shows why we want to use a small multiple for this. It's all a bit of a mess. I'll pop the type of activity on color there as well, just to differentiate the two. So we now want to break this up and turn it into that small multiple chart that we had before. So for this, we want to create a trellis vector X. So this is possibly one of the most used tricks that I use in Tableau. So I want to take the index of each run, each activity, and we want to repeat that index for every 8th one. I'm using 8 because I have 60 activities in here, and it works quite nicely into an 8x8 grid with space for the title in that bottom. So we'll pop that on our columns. Here, we change it to discrete because we don't want it on a continuous scale. And if we change our calculation to be specific, we want to take into account all of these things, and we want to move across every activity. So you can now see that you'll have your first activity in here, the second, third, fourth, and so on, and then your ninth activity will come back into this box. So we need to do the trellis for the y-axis as well. For this, I'm going to divide by 8 instead of using that modulo. So we want to keep it all as an integer. So use index -1 and then divide it by 8. Same thing, bring it onto the shell, change it to a discrete, and edit the table calculation using all of these points of detail. Wait for Tableau to catch up. Not crash. Sorry about that. And we want to repeat that for every activity ID. So just make this take up the entire view. If you look at this shape that we have here, we can check that it's roughly what we wanted for our activity 1, which it is. We now just want to tidy up this view a bit, take away the headers, and I'll take away the grid lines as well, because we don't want those showing on our final view. Grid lines, the 0 lines in there. So we're now starting to see kind of where we wanted to go. One of the things that still isn't quite right is the tooltips. So it's good to have a think about what information you want to include in the tooltips. Additional to what's here, we would like to see the distance and the duration as text so that you get that minutes and second marker. And we're also going to bring time back onto there as well. Just grab the tooltips as I used them before. Take all of this out. It's all formatted for us. So the only thing left to do is change that format of the date. We don't want to see it at every time. We just want to snapshot. What day did I do this run? How far did I go? How long did it take me? So that we're just going to go to format and change it on the pane. Just be looking at the date. And you can also see we've got a lot of decimal points on that distance. So again, I'm just going to change that to just go bring back the 1 decimal place. So we've now got our maps. I'll rename this sheet to maps, and we want to think about that background with the circles that we had before. So for this, we want to use our trellis again. We'll change to a discrete here, and we want a different mark for each of our activities. And then on there, we also want to show a label with the distance and the duration. We can now sort out our table calculation, and we can just select all of these. And because there's only 1 mark, we don't need to worry about the level that it's going to. Again, with the Y. And if we make this the entire view, I'll change the mark here to a circle. So I also brought in an element of color, which was driven by the hour of the day that I went for the run. So really simple calculated field for that. Of day. And using Tableau's built-in date part function, we can pull back the hour for our time field, which we can bring into plot. And we don't want to be looking at the sum of all of the hours over all of those points. We instead want to be thinking about what hour did I start my run in. Also going to just change the color palette for that to use the sunrise sunset. And those colors are a little bit bright for what I was looking for, so we'll turn the opacity down just a bit as well. And we can format the labels. So I don't really want to use font like Flowbook. I'm going to pull in Bauhaus instead. Not the greatest font depending on what you're doing, but it's a little bit fun. You can now see we've got that pulling through. If you match the mark color and turn the opacity down, like so, it just starts to blend into the background a bit more. We can make these central as well. You take away these headers, the grid lines that there are through. So you can then increase the size of our marks. And don't worry too much about the exact size and whether everything's fitting. It's all going to move around a little bit once we move into the dashboard. So we'll rename this sheet circles. We can start to assemble the dashboard. So the first thing that I tend to do when I start a new dashboard is take away this phone layout. If you're not specifically designing something for a mobile user, it's just going to all squish up and generally look not how you want it. And I'll always forget if I don't do it. So we'll drag our circles sheet onto the view, hide the title, and we're going to create our own legend in a minute, so we can take that away as well. So we need to resize our dashboard. I used just a square. And we're also going to change the padding of things a little bit. You'll notice when you bring in a new sheet to Tableau, it always gives you these 4 pixels of outer padding. We're going to take those completely away. And we're going to select the item that everything's sitting in, this tiled container. And you'll see that that's also got an outer padding of 8. What I'd like to do is bring in a kind of background color, that gray border that you saw around the original. To do that, we're just going to take away the outer padding and bring in some inner padding of 20. So it just pushes that circle chart so it doesn't start until you're 20 pixels in around the whole side. And I'll just use a light gray like this. And I'll change the background of this sheet as well to use a color like this. And you'll see now the text is fitting quite nicely inside those. It's not glaringly obvious. You want your user to kind of be able to see that information, but not necessarily straight away. So we can then bring in our maps over the top of here. So we'll change this to floating. And we're just going to pop them up. Take away this title, the legend. Again, we'll incorporate the legend in other parts of the view. And if we change this layout, you can just type in the coordinates, fitting nicely in line with our circles. We obviously need to be able to see the circles, so we'll change the background. And that's okay. These aren't the colors that we wanted. We'll go back and change them now. The main reason that I didn't change them before, I'm just double clicking here, change the colors, was I didn't change them before because the walking ones are white and you now can't see them. Whereas on our circle background, they're quite nicely visible there. So you'll then want to add a bit more context around this, the title and that show details theme with your legend in it. So I won't take you through the whole of the title because it's a little bit fiddly getting it pixel perfect, but there is one little trick that I thought I'd share with you. When we bring in our text item and we call it, say, walking, just to do that walking part. Make that nice and big, and we want it to be white, just to incorporate that feeling of where we have obviously font as well to what I use in the tooltips. So it's okay, but you can't see it terribly clearly. So to correct for that, we can add a background just to this item, or we can make it slightly off center and bring in a bit more design to it. So just going to bring in a blank sheet. And if we change the layout of this, we can make the background black. And then if you find it in the item hierarchy, you right click, change the floating order, and just send it backwards. And you can now see the walking title a lot clearer. So I did the same thing for the running part of the title, just with black text on a white background. So finally, that's kind of the legend for the color of the lines brought in. We then need the legend for the color. So for this, we're going to create a new sheet, call it legend. And we want to take our hour of the day columns. You'll remember in the viz that I created, we just had these circles going across just to give you the indication that when it's morning, you're at this side of the color palette. When it's the evening, you're at this side. Go back where we're creating this. Because we want that level of detail in there, we want to change this to a discrete dimension. And then we bring in the hour of the day color to change it to circle. We obviously want this to take up the entire view, and we can make these just a little bit bigger. Change it so that you're looking at that same color palette that we were using before. Make sure you use the exact same measure as we used before as well, and just bring those colors into line using the opacity. So we want to hide the header and then bring in these hours of the day as a label. In order to create a copy, if you didn't know, you can just hold down the Control or Command button on your keyboard and it will create a copy of that fill, which is a really nice, useful text I use. And we'll just add in the minutes there, change the font so that for everything. We'll just increase the size. It would also be nice to bring through that mark color. And this time we're going to set the labels just on top of the circles rather than in the middle. Center them. You don't really need to see all of them. So we can just show the min and the max. And it just brings everything a bit clearer. You'll also notice that there's a lot of space between the label and the circle here. To kind of get rid of this, you can use a placeholder. I use placeholders loads in what I do in Tableau. So just double clicking in the row pane there and typing in the min of 0. You know that whatever happens, this is going to be 0. So all of your marks are going to stay in that same straight line, and it brings your label down in line with that. We take away the header, and there are some 0 lines coming through somewhere. Yeah. if you know a quicker way to get rid of all these lines, then please do let me know. I think it's actually the axis rulers that are playing with me here. We don't want the user to be able to see a tooltip, so we'll take that away. And coming back to our dashboard, you'll remember that we had that kind of floating container with a few bits of information in it. So I'll just create a vertical container, and I'll just pop a background on there so you can see what's going on. We want to, at the top of here, have a kind of bit of a description. I'm just going to say these are my activities from, and then just reinforce that key for the walking, running, and just explain how you've ended up with those colors or the background symbols. So I'm just going to say walks are in white, runs are in black, color shows the time of day. Always make it the same. Yeah, we're going to use that same gray. Not going to use that same gray. That was something else. So you now have that kind of header. You can then bring in your legend into here. We'll hide the title. It's given us another legend which we don't want. So we just move the map over. The map will be covering this container box, and we can just take that out and move at the right point. So final little thing with this container, and add in just a name. This was Garmin. Centralize it. Same font. We'll just have that nicely at the bottom there. And then if we resize all of this a little bit smaller, double click just to select the container there. And maybe a bit bigger. It's all a bit of trial and error at this point. I won't go through it in detail just now. So you'll then want to add in that show hide button, which is just a really nice way to take that box out and clean up the view. So we'll edit the button, change it to text. Maybe you have an icon that you'd prefer to use. That's fine. So for when that box is shown, we want the text to say hide details. I'll just give the font for just now. We'll pop a faint border on there, and we don't want the background. And then when the item's hidden, we want to go the other way. So show the details. This black is that same border. So now you can see you've got your text there, and when you click, it shows and hides. And the final thing I'm just going to do is change the opacity of this container just down, just ever so slightly to up there, just to remind the user that there's something going on behind here that they're possibly missing if that box is open. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour how I created this viz. I appreciate I may have gone a little bit fast. Please do let me know if you have any questions about this. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you thought about this, see your creations that you use, that you make with it. And yeah, just I love to talk about all things data and Tableau. Just get in touch. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, thank you for sharing your inspiration and the list. So
That's okay. Thank
there
you.
is, yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
No, thank you for having me on VizConnect.
Perfect. There is one question from Tom, and he's asking, how long did it take for you to develop this visualization initially?
It took probably a couple of days to kind of get the calculations all working. The inspiration for it came from a viz that I saw by Frederick Foray, who took 10 years of his running data, created these small multiple maps, and put them all in one view. It's an amazing viz, and I recommend you go and have a look at it. So that definitely kind of took the time down. I'd say a lot of the time that I spent was cleaning the data and coming up with the design with the circles on the background. So yeah,
I have one question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have one question for you, Chris. How did you start your Tableau journey, and what was the role of Tableau community in it?
So I started using Tableau in 2018, as he said at the start of the session. I was working for an education data company, just as a placement during my degree, and Neil Richards, a Zen master, was working there at the same time. He ran a kind of lunch and learn session showing people what he does with Tableau, both for work and in his personal time, and sort of just encouraged people to get involved with the wider community on Twitter if they were interested. And I really latched onto that. Started taking part in Makeover Monday, Sports Viz Sunday, and other community initiatives that there are. And yeah, the community has been great, and I definitely wouldn't be where I am now without it, without that positive feedback that you get from people.
Thank you, Chris. So if you have any question for Chris, please feel free to put it in the chat. And Chris, what will be your advice for someone who's just starting with Tableau? Like how they should go ahead, start the Tableau community, and what will be your advice in terms of how they should go ahead and start using the product?
I would say ask questions on social media. Ask questions of yourself, of your own data when you're in the tool. Right clicking, I've heard people say, is the best way to learn what Tableau can do. There's so much hidden functionality in there. Just giving something a right click brings up so many options and just enables you to explore the data that you have in front of you in a new and different way that you possibly wouldn't have thought of before. And use data that you like, data that interests you, that really brings out your passion. It's a lot easier to spend time and learn something and develop something new if it interested you already beforehand.
Thank you, Chris, for that. I think we don't have any questions from the people on the call. So I think with that, thanks a lot, Chris, for coming on VizConnect, talking about your passion with Tableau, and also teaching us how we can go ahead and use data from Strava and other sources to go ahead and get started a journey with the data.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good fun.
Perfect. With that, thanks a lot for joining. Take care, be safe,